Okay, so this is pre-algebra. We're solving one-step equations, and in this particular video we're going to be using addition here to solve. And so our standard here is solving equations in one variable, and our lesson goal using addition. First thing we want to talk about here are opposites, and opposite numbers are numbers that add to equal 0. So examples are 3 and negative 3, because 3 plus negative 3 sure enough equals 0. Other examples are 10 and negative 10, negative 158, 158. So essentially any number and its opposite signed number, so the positive and the negative of the same number because they add to 0, are opposite numbers. And opposite numbers are important here in solving equations because they allow us to move numbers from one side of an equation to the other. And so we're going to talk about what it means to move numbers here in a moment. The next important thing we need to talk about are equations. Equations are things that have an equal sign, and when two things are equal, they are in complete balance. And so we have a picture here of a balance where we could picture the equal sign being right in the middle here. And so for these two things to be equal, they have to be the same on both sides. So how are we going to talk about opposites in equations? And so we must use opposites to keep our equations balanced. So for example, if we have what number minus 1 equals 4, this might kind of be simple here in our head, but I'm going to use what number here as a question mark. That's what I'm trying to find. And I'm going to use this x as a negative number representation equals 4 positive circles here. So if I want to find out what this question mark is, I need to remove everything that is with the question mark. So I need to isolate it all by itself. So if I have an x here, I know that I need to add an o. I need to add its opposite here so that this will become 0. So if I just kind of put a line here, here's what has just happened. I add these together and I get 0. I still have question mark, and now I've got 5 positive circles from this side. And so I know that question mark plus 0 is going to just remain question mark. And so I've got question mark equals 5. Now here's where the balancing act comes in terms of our scale. So remember that this whole side right here, is like the left pan in my scale, and this whole side right here is like the right pan in my scale. And so if I add a circle to one side of my scale, in order to keep it in balance, I have to add that same amount to the other scale. And so I think about this as a scale in terms of keeping everything in balance, and whatever I do to one side, add or subtract, I have to do the exact same thing to the other side to keep everything in balance. So example 1, this says you have some coins. You take 4 away. You now have 6 coins. How many coins did you have? So we can look at this situation in terms of the following with our x's and our o's. So we had some coins. We don't know how many. We took 4 away, and so x's, remember, are going to be negative numbers, and it leaves me with 6 coins. So here's my scale because I've got the equal sign, so I've got this side over here has to be in balance with this side over here. Now if I want this question mark to be the only piece that is there, I need to add some numbers here that will be opposites and make this portion of my equation become 0. That's my whole goal. So if I add 4 circles to the left side of my balance, I have to also add 4 circles to the right side of my balance. And so I now have question mark plus 0 equals, if I count these up, I have 10. And question mark plus 0 is just going to remain question mark. And so I would have 10 coins. A second example. You have a big bag of peanut butter M&Ms. You aren't sure how many were in the bag when you started eating them, but there are now 22 left. You have eaten 46 of them. How many were in the bag to start with? So here we've got the number that we started with, which is M. I'm not sure how many there were, minus how many I've eaten, that was the 46, and then equals the amount remaining, and that's 22. So we've got our equation. Now, we could go ahead and make x's in circles like we did for the prior example, but hopefully by now we have kind of seen how the power of opposites work. So I need to make this 46, which is a minus 46. I need to make that become 0 so that my m is by itself. So I'm going to use the opposite of 46. I'm going to use the opposite of negative 46 to know that I need to add 46 to both sides. And so again, if this is my scale, I need to keep everything in balance. So if I add 46 on one side, I have to add 46 to the other. Now that leaves me with m. And for the sake of keeping things simpler and saving you time, we can know that these are going to cancel out because they become 0. And then equals, and then when I add those up, I've got 22 plus 46. That would leave me with 68 M&Ms. Okay, remember that we always want to label our answers for story problems. So a couple more examples here that are not story problems. It says solve the equation, show your work, k minus 7 equals 11. So in terms of what I want you to do for showing your work is I want you to tell me or show what number you would add or subtract. In this case it's add to both sides in order to isolate my variable. So I want to get k by itself. I'm using opposites. I know that those will cancel, and I'm going to be left with 18. So your problems should look like this. You need to write down the problem. You need to write down the step in which you are using opposites, and then you can write your answer and put a box around it. Last example here. Solve the equation and show your work. So this time, again, I want to isolate my variable. I know that I need to do the opposite of subtracting 12, so I'm going to add 12 to both sides. And now we need to be very careful here. We need to be very careful about watching the signs of our numbers so we don't get tricked here. I've got negative 20 and I'm adding 12 to that. So I'm already at negative 20 units away from 0, and I'm going 12 units closer to 0. And so my answer here would be negative 8. And if you're in doubt, go ahead and use a calculator to help you with those. But that's going to take care of 4 examples here for solving equations using addition.